Hey guys, how are you all doing today? Evylyn here, and I'm bringing you the second part of my Fury Warrior guide in Worlds of Draenor. So what are we going to cover in this video today? First up, we're going to cover the stat priority, then we're going to cover my talents, and finally my glyphs that are used for 3v3 arena. Alright guys, so let's get straight into it. So my stat priority I've chosen is Strength, then Crit, next Mastery, Multi-Strike, Versatility, and then finally Haste. Now the reason I put crit over all others is because of a thing called enrage, and it's also because of cruelty. As you guys can see, cruelty you gain 5% more stats from critical strike than you would from any other stat. That's the reason why crit's on top. Secondly is because of the enrage proc. The enrage proc, every time you use bloodthirst, when you get a critical strike, you gain enrage. Same with berserker rage, and this will make you generate 10 rage and increases your damage done by 10% for 8 seconds. Now this means every time you crit, so not just once, every time you crit you're going to gain that 10 rage, you're going to get that 10% extra damage, and you're also going to get a raging blow proc, because every time you become enraged you're going to gain a raging blow proc. So that means every 2 times you hit bloodthirst you're going to have 20 extra rage, you're going to have that 10% increased damage at all times, and you're going to have 2 procs of Raging Blow, which is definitely a good thing because you'll have increased damage. Not only that, you can also use that rage for things like Shield Barrier or Wild Strike, depending on how much rage you have. But you'll find that you get rage up really quickly if you have crit because of the enrage proc. One more thing to mention before we go to the talents and the glyphs is the mastery. The reason why mastery is the second stat is because when you're enraged, which you're going to have quite often because you're going to get that proc from bloodthirst, you're going to do 17% more damage. And that increases to 21, almost 22%. So that's 22% more damage when you're enraged, which is why I'm going to tell you my talent choice in a minute and why I've chosen what I've chosen. But that's basically 21% more damage on top of your 10%, which ends up being 31% more damage, which is quite a lot. Okay, so guys, next up we're going to start my talent choices, and I'm going to tell you why I've chosen these talents and what the benefits are of each and what the disbenefits are of each. They're also going to coincide with my stats that I told you a minute ago. So first up we're going to have Juggernaut. Juggernaut is okay, but the problem with Juggernaut is you've only got a charge every 12 seconds, so you haven't got that extra charge that you might need in certain situations, which I'm going to show you in a clip in a second. But I feel that double time is a lot stronger because double time has the ability to charge in on 2 charges if need be. For instance, when you're charging here and pummeling the healer, or when you charge the healer, pummel the healer, and the healer charges away and it's the healer you're trying to kill, so you're able to charge straight back. I feel that makes that a lot stronger choice, whereas Warbringer is on a 20 seconds timer, meaning Warbringer you're going to find that Warbringer is going to leave you definitely more high and dry than Juggernaut or double time would. So in this clip here we're fighting Smoke Bomb Cleave. I'm going to shockwave bow here and I'm going to get stunned in a sec. Then what we'll go with here is to switch to the Druid. I'm going to charge over here in the Druid. Now if I had Juggernaut or if I had Warbringer I wouldn't be able to get back on him. I pummel him, he's charged away after I used the charge, so I charge straight back in and get straight back on him and we're able to get on him and get the kill. Next up we have Impending Victory, second win in the Rage Generation. Now Impending Victory, even though it's on a 30-second timer, it's only 15% of your health back. Now that's alright, but in certain situations you're going to find you're either CC'd or silenced or something and you're on pretty low health and you're going to die if you aren't able to get yourself back up. And Impending Victory is just not going to cut it. Second Wind definitely doesn't cut it because of the fact that when you're stunned or CC'd, Second Wind is not active, and even when it is active at 35% of your health, it's only going to give you 10% health back, which is definitely not something you want to go for. Whereas in Rage Generation it works pretty well with other CDs and glyphs, which I'll show you in a second. It does 30% of your health back, as you guys can see here, and it also on a 1 minute cooldown, which means you can rotate it between all your defensives like Die with the Sword, Rally Cry if you need to, or you can combine it with your other CDs just to keep yourself alive a bit better. So I'm going to show you guys a quick clip of this in action.
Silence for 5, dude. You gotta pop defensive.
Popping defensive now, dude.
I can't, I'm getting rooted. There, he's stunned, Evylyn. He's stunned.
I'm going him, dude. Go him. Triple shockwave, man. Miss him off, man. Miss him off. He's dead.
He's dead.
GG. The next talent tier is Furious Strike, Sudden Death, and Quenchable Thirst. Now, Furious Strike is pretty nice, but you have to pull your rage up to get this to work right. Sudden death requires you to use one-handed weapons, which is still nice, and the proc is pretty good. I feel it's pretty random, but the talent I've chosen out of the three is Unquenchable Thirst. Now, out of the three talent choices, I'm actually going to go into more detail in a second video, and I'm going to explain why I've chosen Unquenchable Thirst in more detail. It's also going to coincide with the fact whether you're using one or two-handed weapons, and you're going to get a feel for why I've picked that talent over the rest. There's a lot of detail in it, and you may think to yourself like, oh, I should be using one-handed weapons in this spec, or I should be using this and this spec and this and this spec. Well, that's why I'm making a second video, because I want you guys to have a more detailed, broad vision of it, so you guys know why I've chosen this talent. Because I could go into a long explanation of this, but I'm not going to do that for this video. I'm going to make it a second video so you guys can go view it. But this is the talent I've chosen, and the main reason being is because this can be used in many different ways, like defensively and offensively. The next talent tier is Stormbolt, Shockwave and Dragon Roar. Dragon Roar is pretty bad because it spreads damage around characters. It doesn't just hit the one target. If it hits two targets, it will then use half the damage of one and half the damage on the other. So you don't want to be going Dragon Roar. Now, Shockwave and Stormbolt are pretty nice choices, and I'll use Shockwave depending on what comp I'm playing. For instance, if I'm playing with, say, a Hunter and a Paladin, and I feel the Paladin's going to be like at the Hodge job, and I'm finding a double melee comp, sometimes it's better to use Shockwave, or on certain maps, like Blade's Edge Arena, you're going to find that you're going to get triple Shockwave off more because you're going to be sitting on the bridge most of the time, usually. I find that this talent is probably better than the other two, in my opinion, because it's able to use it and get triple shockwaves, which is quite nice. And if you use the last talent, which I'm going to explain later in a minute, anger management, you're going to see why it's so sweet. You can get like really short shockwaves. It's pretty ridiculous. However, Stormbolt is pretty good depending on what you're fighting. Let's say you're fighting two casters and you want to CC the healer, and you find that you can't get shockwaves off too often. You're going to want to spec this, especially if you're not playing with, say, a Paladin or any healer that can stun, because this is going to make it easier for you to get Stormbolts off. And once again, it coincides with the anger management talent, which I'm going to explain now in a minute. I'm going to show you a quick clip of Shockwave in action. So here in this clip, guys, I'm going to triple Shockwave, and you're going to see what it does. It forces all the trinkets, and it forces tree form for the druid. The next talent choices are Mass Spell Reflection, Safeguard and Vigilance. Now, while Vigilance does provide 30% reduced damage, and if you're playing like a really stupid comp that you're just going to want to just kill something really quick, this talent can be quite good to help keep one of your team members alive, but it's still not the choice I would choose because most of the time you're going to have a long game. And the next talent is Safeguard. And the reason the difference between Safeguard and Vigilance is Safeguard is on a 30-second cooldown, Vigilance is on a 2-minute cooldown. Now, this reduces the damage you take by 20% for 6 seconds, and I know the other one's 12 seconds, but in a longer fight, this is going to be more beneficial because you're going to find yourself using this a hell of a lot more than the other one. Even though it doesn't remove your roots, it's still a pretty good choice. Now, Mass Spell Reflection. A lot of people have overlooked this talent, but this talent actually has some good beneficial things to it. Now, for instance, when you're fighting a Hunter comp, before you use Safeguard to get the roots, but if you have Mass Spell Reflection and if you're quick enough, you can actually reflect the Hunter's trap back onto the Hunter, therefore not getting your HC or get CC'd. It's actually a pretty nice thing to use in Arena, and I've used it a couple of times, but it's really hard to pull off because, especially if the Hunter's right beside the target. If you can see the Hunter walking towards your healer is in line of sight, just throw up a reflect, and most of the time you will actually get the reflect off and reflect the trap. The next talent tree is Bladestorm, Bloodbath and Avatar. Now, I've done a bit of extensive testing, and Bladestorm seems to actually outperform Avatar miles in damage. So I think Avatar has kind of become redundant at this point. It's 3-minute cooldown and it doesn't do that much damage. 20% more isn't a lot. It's not really worth your while, especially in most comps these days. Most people can peel you anyway, so it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So the two choices you're looking at here is Bloodbath and Bladestorm. Now, personally, I feel Bladestorm does a lot more single target damage than Bloodbath, but Bloodbath can be good in certain circumstances. Like, for instance, like let's say you're training somebody and you want them to be slowed down. Like if you're playing TSG or Kitty Cleave, I could see it working pretty well there because that means you wouldn't have to focus on using your hamstring and you can go full out on all damage. But at the same time, Bladestorm removes you from roots and it does a heck of a lot of damage compared to the two talent choices. So out of the three, I would choose Bladestorm just simply for the fact that Bladestorm is on 1 minute cooldown and it does a shit ton of damage with both your weapons, not just your walk-on weapon. I mean, I've seen it hit for 20k main hand and like 11k offhand or something like that. That's like 31k every time you turn around the spin for 6 seconds. So that's like almost 190k damage, which is pretty freaking awesome in my opinion. It's definitely the best choice in arena. The only thing about this talent choice though is if you're playing with say a mage or someone CC you can't break, you gotta be really careful. If you're not a careful person, then I would choose Bloodbath instead, because you'll find that you might knock out the sheep sometimes. The last talent choice is Anger Management, Ravager or Siegebreaker. Now all the three of these talents are actually pretty damn good, but the problem with Ravager out of the three is Ravager people can walk out of, so people do that quite often. But Siegebreaker does have some limited use to it. For instance, let's say you're playing TSG and you're going against the healer, and the healer wants to cast. If he uses any of his immunities like Spirit Walker's Grace or Devotion or anything that makes him immune, all you have to do is Siegebreaker, and it actually interrupts because it knocks him back. It interrupts the cast. It doesn't stop him casting again straight away afterwards, but it puts an off and off healers off for like at least 2 seconds, which is enough time to get maybe a stun off, or someone else to do another stun or anything, or you could end up getting the pummel off if you just get it at the end of the cast. Wait till he's cast the end of it, just before he casts it, hit him, interrupt, then he has to cast another cast, and by the time the end of the second cast comes, maybe, just maybe, you might be able to pummel the cast. So this is a good choice in certain comps, but most of the time you're going to want to use Anger Management, and the reason being is Anger Management actually allows you to get 20-second Stormbolts. So if you're finding in a comp like say KFC and you want to stun the hero a lot, Stormbolt every 20 seconds is pretty OP if you ask me. Now also with the same thing with Shockwave, it works pretty well with Shockwave if you're coming against a triple melee comp, or if you're coming against 2 melees and a healer and you find you want to peel for your healer, Shockwave, Anger Management, 20-30 second shockwaves. Sometimes you can get 15-second shockwaves if you manage to get a triple shockwave and then lower it down the cooldown. It becomes pretty ridiculous, guys. So in all, Anger Management is definitely the best talent choice of the three, but Siegebreaker does have its uses and so does Ravager. Now out of the three guys, like you guys, this is my BG spec and this is also my arena spec. But for duels, you might want to use Stormbolt, depending on if you're not going to be able to get a triple shockwave. But Blightstorm is pretty good in duels. Certain things you might want to use is Siegebreaker, like on some classes like that you can't actually fear. Like for instance, you can't fear a warrior. Sometimes if a shaman's good enough, you can't fear a shaman, you can't fear a priest. Just Siegebreaker was pretty good in that situation. But Anger Management is pretty good for hunters, like when you got Stormbolt, you get 20-second Stormbolts, and to get back on them more often. And basically Stormbolt, Anger Management for hiding classes that you're going to be able to get triple shockwaves off, like a shaman, like for instance Enhanced Shaman, you'll be able to shockwave both with wolves and him. Shockwave is pretty good in that situation. So they're the three deviants I would use. I would never go Bloodbath though, because Bloodbath isn't really that great in duels, neither is Avatar. So Anger Management, Siegebreaker, Blightstorm always the choice, Stormbolt or Shockwave, and the other three talent choices are normal as before. And lastly we have the glyph choices. The glyph choices I've gone for can be changed between anything and everything. If you're going for duels, then you're going to want to have the Rallying Cry glyph at all times. You're going to want to have the Bloodthirst glyph at all times, and then depending on what you're fighting, depends on what you want to change the third glyph to. For instance, if you're fighting a hunter, you might want the glyph of Long Charge, because they're going to be trying to kite you. If you're fighting, say, a caster, you might want Rude Interruption to interrupt their cast to gain 6% more damage. If you're fighting a paladin or a mage, you might want Shattering Throw glyph, for instance, for that. If you don't need anything and you just want pure healing, you can also go for the Raging Blow glyph to give yourself extra healing. Now these are all good choices. You can also glyph of Die by the Sword, which isn't really that great for Fury in my opinion. But another choice, which I actually haven't bought the glyph yet if you want to go for it, is glyph of Drawn Sword, which would then give you parry, so when you're fighting like a rogue or something, you might want to get more rage up quickly. Or another third choice is Flawless Defense, let's say a hunter's kiting you. These are all good choices, but my recommendation when you're fighting a hunter would be to have Bloodthirst, Rallying Cry, and the Long Charge glyph. But when you're fighting anything else, like, use all the other choices like I said. Whereas for BGs, I would switch this out with the Raging Blow glyph for the Bull Rush glyph for more healing. If there's too many paladins on your team or mages, I'll switch it out for the Shattering Throw glyph for BGs. Whereas for Arena, The glyph choices are endless for a reason. I mean, one of the good choices I've used, if you find you're not going to use Shattering Throw and they're not going to train you, the choices you might want to use is Root Interruption, Bull Rush, and Enraged Speed. They're the three choices if you're not going to get trained and you don't need a Shatter Throw or anything like that. If you do need the Shatter Throw, I would switch out your Enraged Speed for Shattering Throw. If you think they're going to train you and you're the weakest of the comp, for instance you're playing, let's say, Turbo Cleave, you're going to want the Rallying Cry Glyph to keep yourself alive, and you're going to want the Bloodthirst Glyph to play defensively. Now, ideally, in my opinion, you should always have the Bloodthirst Glyph, because if you spec for Unquenchable Thirst, like I said, you're going to find that if you're spamming that while you're using Shield Barrier in defensive stance, which is pretty optional, as you can see here. I'm just going to attack this really quick. Like, watch my rage go up really quickly. Shield Barrier, you know. It's just a good way to keep yourself alive. Shield Barrier, you know. Just a quick way to keep yourself alive. It's a nice defensive that most people don't actually use because they don't have that talent. Now, at the same time, you're also going to want to have the Raging Blow Glyph in Arena, especially if you think you're going to get trained. But most of the time, these two glyphs are pretty good. But like I said, if you're not going to get trained, you can't switch to the other one. So it really depends on what comp you're playing. Like if you're playing KFC, most of the time they're probably going to go your Hunter, so you can then afford to go Root Interruption, Bull Rush, and Rage Speed. But if you find that you're playing a comp like Turbo Cleave, you're going to find that you're going to be the one trained, so you're going to want to have more defensive glyphs like the Rallying Cry Glyph, Bloodthirst, and etc. But most of the time you'll find that I'll have the Bloodthirst Glyph, I'll have the Rallying Cry Glyph, and I'll only switch it out when I think I'm not getting trained. And if I'm going to get trained, I won't switch it out. And then the third option with Bull Rush if you're fighting melees, Root Interruption if you're fighting casters, and Shattering Throw if you're fighting paladins or mages. One last thing I wanted to say, remember I was talking about at the start about the Enrage? The Mastery Enrage, getting that constant rage procs and rage stuff, that coincides in with the Bloodthirst, Unquenchable Thirst talent, because you're able to spam that and have 100% constant uptime on your Enrage, which like I said, make glyphs like Enrage Speed pretty good. So yeah guys, that's everything from my talent choices to my glyphs and my stats. Hope you guys enjoyed this guide, and I hope it brought you some insight into how to spec your warrior, glyph your warrior, and what stats you should be going for. And yeah, so remember guys, the second part of this video is going to come out pretty soon on the level 45 talents, and which you should be using one or two-handers, as well as what enchants I've gone for. Anyways guys, this is Evylyn out. I love you all, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.